So our first featured speaker will be Anthony Jordan.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'll just kind of set up the book a little bit before I'll read aloud from a chapter in particular that I looked at. I don't want to give the book away. The book's name is Lead for God's Sake, and excuse all the orange post-it notes that you see here. I take a lot of notes as I read. It's actually one of our team's assigned readings as far as coaching. Coach Dressel does that from time to time throughout the year to make sure guys are continuing to develop and look at different points of views and things of that nature. So looking at the title, just based off of what it is, Lead for God's Sake, you can kind of take it, I was talking with Ben a little bit earlier about, different ways of taking it, maybe even calling it double entendre, in that type of form. But I'll kind of get to how it appears now and then what it'll transform to kind of after I get done describing it. But basically the story is set. It's a character story on a high school Kentucky basketball coach. I'm a coach, had a natural tie in there, so I went with it. But it actually really stems away from the game of basketball or sport in general. It's more about leadership and building relationships and faith and different elements to it. But as a background to the story, he's a 42-year-old high school basketball coach that was a superstar basketball player in college. Now he's had tremendous success as a high school, again, basketball coach. And for all of his life, he's been able to be on top, be successful, win, and do things. And now he's going into his third year at this particular high school. And he's had nothing but success, and this is supposed to be the best year yet, but yet still, they're finding trouble, they're having turmoil in the season, and as far as their dedication and commitment toward the team from their guys. So the coach is kind of going through a phase here where he doesn't know which way to go. He's always used to him being able to put in the extra effort, put in the extra work, and command the results from his troops. And for whatever reason, it's not coming to form right here as far as the early part of the book. Intertwined into the book is a couple different relationships, and I'll only highlight two of those because, again, it hits on many different angles. But one key relationship in the book is one with his good friend in the book. His name is Grant Steffen. Grant Steffen is the CEO of a multinational corporation that has done very, very well for himself. Is an Ivy League educated person, and their relationship really takes form in the early part of the book. It's really a book of two phases. One with him and Grant, and then the next gentleman is Joe Taylor, which is the school's janitor. And so through the first phase of the book with this relationship with Grant, they're all about them. They're in similar points of their lives. They're the same age, they're middle-aged men, and they've always had success, and Grant being not the exception. And he has gotten to the same point that Coach has gotten to with his team. His employees, they're not performing well, they're not putting in their day's work, they're always complaining, this, that, and other things. And so they're having this conversation, multiple conversations about how they can get the best out of their employees or their team. And again, the early part and the sentiment of the book in the early part is, we're doing all this work, I'm doing this work, why aren't they responding? Why aren't the other people that are around me, why aren't they leading? Why aren't they being leaders that they're supposed to be? In the case of Coach, why aren't my seniors leading the group? Why aren't they doing what they're supposed to do? In the case of Grant, the CEO, why aren't my employees doing what they're supposed to do? I'm paying them well, I'm giving them extra vacation days, I'm doing this. And so, not to take it much further than that, that's where they're at. It's about why aren't we getting the results? As the story moves along, in the second phase that I look at is Joe Taylor, the janitor. He's kind of the popular figure amongst the school children. You'll see him in the book. He'll talk about kids coming in and out of his office at 6 in the morning and whatnot to just talk to Joe. And the one thing with Joe is Joe starts to have a constant communication with Coach, and they start talking about maybe some ways that you can redevelop your pitch to your kids and to your team. And as they go through it, one of the first things, I'll back up just a half second. One of the things that they have two main diagrams within the piece that kind of gives you the idea of what makes people succeed. Okay, and this being one of them, people's motivation. This kind of derived from Grant and Coach's conversation about what I'm doing all this. This is what I have to do to my troops. And the first thing about it, and this is literally what it looks like in the book as well. So that's not my bad drawing. So this is what it looks like in the book. But they talk about people are motivated by two different main factors: rewards and punishment. And in the rewards column, in Grant's case, he talks about the bag of money or giving people more compensation or whatever it is. And in Coach's case, it's wins and losses. So as they feel like they succeed, they have to keep increasing the rewards in this to make people happy, and so on and so forth. Exactly the same thing on the flip end for the punishment. They feel like at certain times we have to crack the whip and make sure that we have our troops or our employees in line, and those are two main ways. That's what they're focused on. That's what they're centered on. They won't budge. They either feel like they have to give more, or they have to punish them more. And in Coach's case, the main character of the book, he feels like because this program has been successful and he's had a lot of wins and he's done a lot of tremendous things, that he has to side more on the hatchet, what they call it. He has to side more on the punishment, and it goes into his tirades and it goes into basically him treating these kids in a very temperamental manner and very poorly, just to get the results that he wants. As the book goes on, there's another, and I'll get back into the next phase of the diagram, but that brings back Joe into it, and Joe breaks down this diagram. He has these conversations weekly, and it's over a 3-month span about what to do with this diagram, this rewards and punishment. And I'll kind of read from some sections in the book here, particularly particularly the 17th chapter in the book. I'll just flip to that. I have so many post-it notes here, I kind of confuse myself sometimes. There it is. Influence and responsibility. Oops. Excuse me, guys. Sorry about that. With the thoughts of the upcoming week racing through his mind, Coach woke at 4:15 Monday morning and couldn't go back to sleep. Rather than waste time tossing and turning, he decided to get a jump on the week. Friday's win, his lack of contentment following the win, and the loss of Brent was still boggling in his mind. Brent was a guy that quit the team. He had some internal issues going on, and Coach decided not to get into. He just thought he was quitting on him. And that story is another storyline that really gives some insight to the story. But and for some strange reason, he thought Joe Taylor might know where he could start looking. Coach pulled his car into the normal parking spot about 5 a.m. and breathed a sigh of relief when he noticed that the lights in Joe's office were already on. After struggling to find the right key to the gym, Coach unlocked the back door and walked quietly down the dark hallway toward the light coming from the half-open doorway to Joe's office. He walked up to the door to peek inside. At first, he didn't see Joe and wondered if maybe already off somewhere in the school fixing something. But when he poked his head in further, he found Joe sitting in the corner, deeply engrossed in whatever he was reading. "Joe," Coach said softly, trying not to startle him. "Hey, Coach, how are you?" answered Joe in his normal, calm, caring manner. "Pretty good, I guess. Is this a bad time?" "Never a bad time for a cup of Joe with a friend," replied Joe as he winked. He stood up and motioned for Coach to come and sit down. "I was just doing a little brush-up reading on one of my favorite leaders." "I see," said Coach, almost afraid to ask who his favorite leader was. You have quite a collection of books, Joe. You must enjoy reading a lot." Now, Joe's office, just to give you a little background on this, Joe's office is not what you would picture as a janitor's office. It's somewhat a library, like you would see on any floor in this building, with books and shelves of books and a quiet reading corner, and it's somewhat different than what you would, at least I would picture in my mind as a janitor's office. Not so much the reading part and the learning as the learning and growing part," said Joe, chuckling as he walked over to the coffee pot and poured a cup for Coach. "You know, I learned a long time ago that two things that most impact our lives are the people we spend our time with and the things we read. Yep, relationships and reading." Joe paused as he set the cup down on the table beside Coach and then turned to walk back to his chair. You know, come to think about it, God must have thought those two things were pretty important too. I mean, given the way he has set us up to grow as a result of both of those things in our lives too. Go figure. Sipping his coffee, Coach tried to figure out what Joe meant by a statement. That's true, I guess. Well, I guess I don't really know. I guess I've never thought of it like that before. Coach fumbled with his words a bit. He hadn't expected to have a conversation about God with Joe, especially not this early in the morning. Joe politely reassured Coach, "Oh, don't worry about it. Most folks don't think about it. They don't think about much anyway. So tell me, Coach, how are the boys doing? Are you making any progress with them? You know, with that hatchet treasure thing you've been working on?" Coach squirmed a little in his chair. "Well, to tell you the truth, that's kind of what I was hoping to talk to you about this morning. The whole thing is really getting a bit confusing to me at this point." "What do you mean when you say confusing, Coach?" asked Joe, resting his arms on the worn-out armrest of the chair. "Well, Friday night we won, and for some reason after the game I felt miserable. It didn't really mean anything to me. It was almost as if winning my treasure wasn't motivating to me anymore." Coach trailed off discouraged. "So you don't want to win this coming Friday?" asked Joe. "Well, of course I do, in the worst way. I spent probably 15 hours this weekend breaking down film." "It sounds like winning still motivates you, so I guess I don't understand what you're confused about," Joe said, tilting his head as if a bit confused now himself. After pausing to think about what he was saying, Coach tried to clarify things. "I guess maybe I'm more frustrated than confused. I don't understand why it seems like nothing really works this year. When Grant and I started talking about the hatchet and treasure thing at the beginning of the season, it all made perfect sense to me. I could really relate, and I really felt like I found the answer to the problems we were dealing with." Coach stood up and walked over to the whiteboard and pointed to the drawing still there from the week before. "The players have become too used to winning, so when winning lost its motivating power, I had to compensate by instilling fear." Now I pointed to the hatchet and stick man's right hand. "I yelled, I screamed, I threw things, I ran them until they puked, I even kicked them out of practice, and it worked for a while. But eventually that seemed to wear off. Guys started fighting more in practice, they fell apart in a couple games that followed, then the unthinkable happened. David, their star center, 6'9" center, committed to the University of Kentucky to play basketball, punched a locker," and that's what he was talking about. Joe sat silently, looked at Coach with sympathy in his eyes. Finally, after what seemed like an hour of silence, he stood up and walked over to the whiteboard. "Coach, can I ask you a question?" Coach headed back to his seat. "Sure, why not? Lord knows I won't have the right answer, though." Joe stood and stared at the drawing of the stick figure. "You see anything missing? Do you see anything missing from this picture? Other than skillful artistry, no. I think it's a pretty complete picture," snapped Coach. "Well, let's think of it another way then. Besides the obvious answer of leadership, what's missing with your guys right now?" Coach thought for a few seconds. "They don't care about winning anymore." "Okay, so they're missing the will to win, right?" Joe wrote the word will on the board. "What else are they missing?" asked Joe, determined to dig deeper now. "Well, they don't care about their teammates," said Coach. "Okay, so they're missing the love for their teammates." Coach jumped in. "Whoa, love's a little strong, Joe, don't you think? These are high school guys we're talking about." "Yeah," replied Joe. "So do you want guys that like the game or love the game?" Joe looked over his eyeglasses at Coach, waiting for a response. "Love, of course," Coach replied. "Okay, you want guys who like to compete or love to compete," pressed Joe, sharpening his point for it. Okay, replied Coach, throwing both hands in the air. "I get your point. Love's fine." Joe wrote the word love on the board underneath the word will, and then turned back to Coach. "All right, anything else?" Joe was obviously fishing for something more. "Well, I guess the only word that comes to my mind when I watch them play is passion. They've really lost their passion for the game. It shows big time." "Great," said Joe, writing the word passion on the board. "What do you mean great?" asked Coach defensively. No, not great they lost their passion. Great that you figured out 3 key things they're missing." Joe walked over to his seat and sat down. "Now look back at the stick figure on the board. Tell me, Coach, if you were a player on the basketball team, missing those 3 things, will, love, and passion, and this was your coach, which hand do you think would best help you find them again?" Coach looked at the picture in silence, and he hesitantly took a stab at answering the question. "I guess the treasure hand. Remember," said Joe, "you've lost your will to win. That means that for some reason you really don't care about winning anymore. And the treasure is the equivalent to winning.